Hello and welcome to Surveyor Says, the podcast from the National Society of Professional Surveyors. Each week, we bring you fascinating guests that are involved in the profession of surveying. My name is Tim Burch, and I'm the Executive Director for the National Society of Professional Surveyors and your host for the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on most of your favorite streaming platforms, as well as our podcast host, Podbean. For more information about the podcast and NSPS, please visit our website, nsps.us.com. So, without further delay, here's our next episode of Surveyor Says, the NSPS Podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Surveyor Says. I'm your host, Tim Burch, and as I just was sharing off recording with our today's guest, I've been looking forward to this conversation because I had the opportunity to meet this gentleman out at the Esri User Conference. He was part of Linda Foster's surveying session and talking about the different aspects of surveying and GIS, obviously, because we were at a GIS conference. And his role within surveying and GIS and putting it all together really fascinated me. And I think you need to hear this story. So, Woodrow Woody, welcome to the podcast, and we appreciate you taking time to do this. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you work, because I think people are going to be a little surprised that the things that you're doing in surveying are somewhere completely different than what everybody's used to. Thank you for inviting me on. My name is Woody Money. I'm a licensed land surveyor in Florida and a GISP. Since 2018, I've been working with the Cadastral Department for the Navy. Our organization is named Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command Southeast. And it's a long name, but it is abbreviated. It's NAVFAC SE. We are in effect the in-house survey shop and courthouse for the Navy. That's a really good way to boil it down for what Cadastral does. NAVFAC in itself is a much broader organization providing environmental. They provide anything from environmental all the way through construction and design. And what we do here is in real estate. And so what we do, we house all of the Navy's land records for 12 states in the Southeast. In the Virgin Islands, as well as Puerto Rico, Cuba, and some Marine Corps sites. And, so I get a chance to touch all those records, to manage a lot of them with a team here. My supervisor, Jason Clements, is a great guy. He heads up our team here in the Southeast. And so just to give you just a little bit of background on who NAVFAC is and where they've been. It goes all the way back to 1842. And I'm not going to give you a full book study on who NAVFAC is, but it goes all the way back to 1842. It was the Bureau of Yards and Docks, and it was the branch of the Navy responsible for building and maintaining Navy yards, dry docks, other facilities related to ship construction, maintenance, and repair. And they did that all the way up till World War I and II, saw a huge expansion. They built entire bases. They tried to expand to go to more versatile and just a better base. So they actually even built boiler plants, hospitals, radio towers, entire bases. So many of our records here were done in the 40s. You could go grab one right now, and it's very, very likely that it was built during that time whenever they were doing so much. The Navy continued to buy and sell land and support the warfighter with facilities all the way up through in the 60s. It was renamed and reorganized, and then now it's been renamed and organized again, but it is Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, and our branch is Southeast. We're all over the U.S. I've got friends in Washington. There's an area, a group that does stuff in Washington. There's a group at Midland over in Virginia. There's a group out in Washington State. There's a group out in California. And our teams manage the real estate for the Navy. And so anytime anything's bought, sold, or leased, or we manage those efforts. And so in effect, we're the surveying arm of the civilian side of the U.S. Navy that manages those land records as well. And it's obviously, you know, how important it is to have surveyors managing those actual property boundaries, especially when they go back to kind of how ours do, all the way back to the creation of our nation,
Exactly.
So just, I wanted to give, I know you asked kind of who I am and my pathway kind of to the Navy here. I wanted to give you just a little bit of a piece of that if you wanted to hear that.
Absolutely.
So it started in Troy University. Big shout out to the Go Trojans. I love those guys. I'm getting another opportunity to talk to them again next month. I'm so excited to get to go back up there. But we've got from there, I received a geomatics degree, and they actually now offer a geomatics degree, and they offer some GIS related degrees, which I think is awesome. By the way, I love the mixture there and the amazing people they're producing. I then went as a rodman and a CAD guy under an Alabama surveyor for a while. And 2008 was a great year.
Fantastic year.
2009 was fantastic. I tried to find a job doing some land surveying within 100 miles of Troy, and at that time, and I know 2 surveyors offered to sell me their business. That was the year I graduated college. You're not buying anything when you graduate college. You can't.
I only laugh because so I don't cry during that time. You betcha.
Oh my gosh! And so I did some bridge layout, worked with bridge design crew for many years. I got challenged by I believe he's the head construction guy over there now. Anyway, a good friend of mine over there was challenged me. He said, "Hey, what are you doing with your surveying degree?" And honestly, at the time, it was kind of just fizzling out because of the 08, 09. And I got up with another buddy of mine. I bought the best surveying calculator I could find, and I went to work on my degree, and I became a GIS technician at the time. I knew nothing about GIS. I'll tell you about that guy later, but knew nothing about GIS. I knew some. I'm not going to say nothing. I graduated from Troy, but I will be honest with you. I was not the best student, and Dr. Ramroop is listening to this and laughing because I so wish I would have applied myself more. I won't say I didn't know anything about GIS, but I had just forgotten a lot, and I wish I was a better student. If I knew then what I know now.
Yes, exactly.
But I became a GIS tech and worked really hard. I took my FS, and a opportunity, came under to work under another surveyor here in Florida, and took that. I took some GIS test prep and actually got my GISP, and I didn't realize how weird that path would be, as far as going to GIS first and then going surveying, but I have some really good friends over at the GIS test prep class. At least I consider them really good friends because they helped me so much, and I am just so grateful. But I get to see them out at Esri every year, which is a wonderful time. But took my GISP, got started on the PS exam. I kept learning under my surveyor, and finally took the jurisdictional exam. And I tell you what, whenever you don't realize it, but in that room, whenever you take that jurisdictional exam in Florida, they post your score right then in your face immediately when you click submit that. I almost fell out of that chair. Because I was expecting 2 weeks, before I would ever
at
hear
least,
back.
yeah.
And anyway, it was just such a relief and such a, I ran around, I would love to say I ran around the room, but it's, but maybe I did that when I got outside. But anyway, to answer your question, who am I? Where did I come from? That is me in a nutshell. And NAVFAC, I think, in a nutshell, it's a great organization. Glad to be a part of it.
Well, and tell us a little more about NAVFAC, because, okay, we're talking about the U.S. Navy. We're talking about coastlines. We're talking about ships and all this other stuff. I think even to the everyman surveyor, it's like, how does that relate back to, really land and all of this stuff? But obviously the Navy has a lot of parcels, a lot of land inventory. Tell us a little bit about what types of facilities that you're out there serving for NAVFAC.
So at any point you might find us, surveying a 8,000 foot runway, or you might find us actually surveying the boundary of a base for jurisdictional purposes. You might find us surveying some, individual internal parcels for lease purposes. We just did some of that down in South Florida. We were up in Tennessee a few weeks ago surveying, establishing the base boundary there at Millington. That had been, some of those monuments are like we discussed earlier, they're very old and they're very historical, and so we have to sometimes dig into 100 years worth of title to really understand who owns the property and where it's located. And so for us, when we do that, like in a few weeks, we're surveying at another place. I don't know that I can mention, but I am, there's some places I can't mention, but for the most part, we're not top secret or anything. But we'll be surveying a base that does a lot of flight training and that kind of stuff for the Navy. It's such fun to just know that you're a part of something bigger. You're a part of keeping us safe here at home by giving the warfighter places to train and maintain those boundaries. I think that's just such a cool feeling, to be able to be a part of that. We'll be surveying, and then all of a sudden you'll have, Blue Angels taking off on the runway that you're surveying, or, we'll be surveying. There's helicopters doing, these little routines where they dive and slide and, do these different, fun stuff. The Marines will be practicing that kind of thing.
Wow.
We were surveying down in Key West, and some guys came by with their hoods open and saluted us. You feel like you're in Top Gun or something. You see those guys, so it's just such an honor to be able to do that. But at the same time, sometimes you're on the coast, like you said, and you find monuments that have been there for forever, and so that's the kind of facilities that we're in. We're in the places where they train. We're in actual installations, where they're conducting operations, and so it does require that you don't go around posting on Facebook every 5 minutes pictures of your work. You kind of got to be selective, but but the work is something that you can be proud of, because whether we're in Texas, Corpus Christi, or we're up at Millington, or we're down at Key West, or we're Jacksonville, or out in Georgia at a base, it's all good work that is tying to the security of our nation, which is a lot of fun.
Exactly. Well, something I want to dig a little deeper into is, and especially with your role there, and the database of all of the historical land records of the Navy. historically, the way our nation was developed, a lot of the lands went to private homeowners, whatever. But then
Sure.
there were federal lands, and a
Right.
lot of that stuff, where a lot of this military stuff was not under any kind of local, municipal, county jurisdictions, whatever. So really, land records that fell within the federal land stayed in the federal
Right.
records. And now you've had the opportunity to help organize and really develop
Right.
based upon GIS. Tell us a little bit of how you have to dip back and forth. I mean, you have to go do some stuff on the I'll say on the public side, but then you
Right.
got to dig into your stuff and how that all intertwines and how important GIS is to having
Right.
a good organization there.
Absolutely. So, our surveys are always of just Navy interest property. So whenever we, there are times whenever the Navy will acquire a piece of land that we need to go, and do research at our local courthouses. And then there's times whenever we have, actual properties that are bases that have been around forever, like in NAS Pensacola. Like we have
Right.
those records here in our files. We have thousands of actual, hard copy maps in our, that we rely on, that we maintain, that we protect. And we also have, records, hundreds of thousands of records that are Navy records that are, protected here. So earlier I mentioned that we're kind of the Navy's courthouse. So really, in effect, we are, we are the final source and the authoritative source for those property boundaries. So when we start go looking for them, when we find a legal description that's from 200 years ago, that is something that we have to spend time to look at and really dig into to understand those boundaries. Did that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of what like I said, Joe Surveyor or the general public doesn't understand, that your work is beyond just going to the local courthouse and figuring out what deeds you need to be able to survey this piece of property. You're working on federal lands that have been out of a public record system for most of them for forever. And being able to intermix where you need to, or be able to really dig deep into that private stash of federal lands, and the fact that you're taking the time now to make these into a GIS, I think that's part of what I was asking is how do we do that?
So I think it takes first of all, it takes a lot of time to really put all of those into the GIS, and make sure that those boundaries are complete. Obviously, no two surveys, particularly, there's always going to be some sort of small, even if it's tiny, sort of gap and overlap inside of a survey, even one related to another. And for me to, coming from GIS, that was something that I had to learn and understand, in that whenever we present those property boundaries, from a Navy standpoint, when we're in, and just from any standpoint, when you're talking about GIS, those property boundaries, between two descriptions are going to have some variance. And so, for us, when we put them into our GIS, we maintain those inside of a polygon feature class, obviously, but
Right.
but some of those, as far as it relates to the actual survey, we maintain those inside of line feature classes, the actual survey property boundary, and so that is because that allows for that small, ever be it so small, misclosure that happens within the actual survey itself. So much like you would have this in CAD, we have learned to create that inside of GIS. And so, as far as building that data and compiling it together, it looks like a geodatabase for every state plane. right now. And there's a
Right.
better way to do that, possibly that I've been discussing with a colleague. But right now it's a geodatabase for every state plane, and inside of those databases are mirrored feature classes. And so everything that you would see inside of a normal survey, a typical survey, we have a feature class for. So um, that's how we're currently maintaining those. And it takes, a little bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a routine curve, I guess you could call it,
Right.
to get there, as far as kind of coming from a CAD driven environment to a GIS driven environment. But the tools are there. And I would encourage, anyone to give it a try, create some feature classes and try to build yourself a survey inside of GIS. It is a much different routine, but what it does is it opens up the surveying world to a GIS technician. For myself,
Right.
coming into the surveying world, I immediately wanted to do my surveys in GIS, and so that's where I've been and what I've been doing, because that's the world that I know. It's not necessarily, I'm not going to ever say that's just the best way to do it, but that's a way to do it. And it's a way to bring in people who are, more GIS driven into the profession, to help them begin to understand how those things work together. So,
Exactly.
does that more answer your question?
No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because the way I'm, after meeting you and hearing about your role, your story, and how all of this stuff is put together, and the fact that you're putting all of this stuff in one, in a good master database, it's almost like you're a project surveyor for this huge project that covers how many ever states. I mean, that's it.
Right.
It's everything.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about, because I think that's what surveyors need to have, that mindset going forward. That they might do a survey in this county and do a survey in this county and this survey in this county, and think that all of them don't need to be interactive. But the way we are going forward with the software, with the geolocation of everything, geospatial data collection, it really
Right.
can be put into one big database and reflect the work that we've done.
Absolutely. You can have, like I mentioned, all of those geodatabases in different state planes. You can actually have a master geodatabase with that's authoritative. That is we can say, hey, this is the data that we need to rely on. It lives right here in our authoritative, location. And so we do cover 12 states. So what you could do, and what would be a great way to do it, is to have your authoritative database and then have data sets that are linked to different state planes. I can tell you that each of those data sets, if you were to have them in those state planes, you were to compare that to the same set of CAD data in a state plane, you're going to find that it does not change it. It doesn't translate it. It doesn't move it. It doesn't, adjust it. I think that's a part of the big fear, of using GIS for something that, because
Right.
GIS has typically been seen as a sort of a ancillary tool or an extra tool of some sort that is just a good way to get you close, or sort of your tax map kind of, GIS. But in reality, that what I've learned and what we've noticed, if you put in data to a certain accuracy level, and meaning survey grade level, it remains at a survey grade level. And our, so for us, we have, as far as I spoke a little bit about our parcels, but if you were to look into our monument databases, we have, so we keep our monuments and our surveys in the same database there. But for as monument type features, in a database, you have points, lines, and polygons, and those are individually as accurate as you have entered them. So if we have our monuments, we have various monuments, all kinds of monuments. I mean, from anything from a cool whiskey barrel that was filled with concrete and written property corner on, all the way to just your typical property, PK and disc. If you will take that monument feature class and put inside of it those accurate X, Y, and Z, and then take it, and something that I do recommend doing is adding attribution. Add your attributes for northing, easting elevation, and then actually physically put into the attributes in the GIS your XYZ. Then forever, that XYZ is stored for those monument location. It's stored inside the attribute, it's stored inside the location. That way, if something, God forbid, ever happens to your data, somebody actually ends up, somebody can mess up a CAD file just like they can mess up a pro file or, like
any data set.
So if somebody does come in there and, adjust something or something happens, you've still got your actual northing, easting elevation stored within the attribution of your feature, and that's the beauty of GIS, is that it opens up all of these features. You can actually store those attributes within that data set, so you can know, hey, this monument is authorized to horizontal, vertical, or both, or maybe it's something we're not sure what the heck it is, so maybe it's none. It can also be, I can record what it is. I can put a picture of it inside of that database and store it there. So I now have built myself a version of the county courthouse, out of my data, and I can see all of it inside of a, one big pro file. And I know people have done similar things with CAD where you've put all, they put all their CAD drawings in the same drawing. But this is so much deeper when you do it with inside of GIS. It's because of the attribution that you're able to use, and because of the apps that you're able to build on top of it once you're done. So anyway, that's a little bit about the GIS side, and maybe I gave you more than you asked for.
No, that's exactly what I was looking for, because that's what intrigued me about during your presentation at the UC was, you're almost, I'm going to call you a almost like a big municipal record database, but then you're also the physical side of it, that's going out and doing the surveys, going out and finding the monumentation, setting the appropriate monumentation. I mean, besides the record keeping, you're also the eyes and ears and the work that goes into it. And that's the part that really fascinated me, that I think people need to hear that part of it, that that's a side of the government that we don't see. And that's very important. Now, we talked about going out and doing boundaries for the bases and some of these other normal survey stuff. Anything survey related that maybe is a little out of the ordinary, out of the typical private, residential, commercial surveyor? Anything that you can speak of that you do survey wise, it's a little bit out of the norm?
I would say, out of the norm would, on top of what you've already mentioned there, I think, having your own historical repository that you have to maintain and rely on, plus surveying, I think that's a little out of the norm. I think some of the things that we get to do kind of in-house here is, sort of in the private side, you're going to see a lot of, I'm trying to figure out how to put this. The almighty dollar is kind of your driver. For the Navy, we are here to be efficient, but we're also here to be accurate. And so our main goal is to be accurate. And so we can take our time and actually dig into where the heck is that actually that section corner. We can actually go in. I've had the pleasure of actually recently finding a lost original section corner here in Florida. Dug down, found the lighter post,
Nice.
and the bearing trees. And so I think that is, but that corner was critical, for the boundary of the base and for our warfighter. That's, I think. So our goal is not to just go out and do something quick and dirty, but to really, and I'm not saying that's every private surveyor. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying our goal is not speed so much as it is our accuracy, because we have to be able to prove, and truly sometimes overprove where our, kind of abundance of information of where our property boundaries lie, from the Navy standpoint.
Well, and I think I like that you hit on that, because it's refreshing to hear that, unfortunately in this day and age, it's price, and unfortunately the surveyor gets put under such rigorous demands that a lot of times it is time and budget, and unfortunately that can be an overwhelming unconscious limiter to doing to going to that nth degree. And unfortunately there's going to be times that that section corner you're talking about, you just recovered, if there were time constraints and budget constraints, it's not a dig on like I said, the private surveyor, but there's a lot of times that they don't have the time, resources, or budget to go do what you just did. And that's, I appreciate the fact that you have the time afforded to you, and you're doing this stuff right. Because I think at the end of the day, as a government employee, as a doing this for the Navy, we want you guys to have this stuff right. I mean, bottom line, we want you to be right on the money. So, no pun intended with the name either. But Mr. Money needed to be on the money. So
yes, for sure.
But no, that's good to differentiate that you are, the surveyors in the federal side of things, you are conscientious of what needs to be done and done right.
Right, because we don't want to ever take advantage of a landowner, and that's never, and so for the Navy, because these boundaries some of them have been hidden for, very long, and it's been sort of a kind of a struggle to maintain them. I know that's could be a shocker, but that, to do an accurate and thorough determination of that boundary that is so historical, that is it sometimes takes an extra few minutes to put that all together. And so I think that kind of differentiates us. We're, I'm not saying we're archaeologists or that we're whatever we are, but we try to focus more intently on the accuracy of the thing and make sure that we've got it right. So we're not taking advantage of the public. We're actually doing right by the taxpayer in efficiency, and we're doing right by not encroaching on their property.
Excellent. Well, I have one last question about the military side of this, because NSPS has really gotten engaged in the last 2 years, and really, making the private surveyors aware of how many military veterans that are coming out that are looking for private opportunities, but also, tell us about, is there any type of opportunities, that come about in the military to join your ranks and to be doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. Well, USA Jobs is a really good, usajobs.gov. You can go online and look. and see what jobs are available. I would also, and right now, if you go out there, there's a couple right now I know of, around the country. I think there's a few in Utah right now. But if you'll check USA Jobs, that's where the announcements actually go up. If anybody wants to reach out, I think we're getting ready to seek out some surveyors here in this office and a cartographer in this office. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, directly and see, hey, I would love to, maybe work in that office or maybe one of the offices around the country, maybe one of the NAVFAC offices around the country. I am not by this offer. I'm not saying that anybody's can reach out to me and just get a job. That's not what I'm saying. But maybe I could be a contact point if they want more information. I can, I'd love to hear from people under any respect. But like I said, there are actually surveying jobs within the federal government structure. Right now, the two jobs that I mentioned in Utah, I think they're with NGA. And I've collected tons of their monuments on our bases.
Nice.
And they do a ton of surveying. The other groups that are around the country with NAVFAC, they also hire for cartographers and surveyors. So, like I said, the Army Corps does a lot of surveying. There's always, some sort of jobs available, and I would encourage them to check even in the case of something like a hiring freeze. Sometimes there's a critical need out there that maybe,
right.
That is needed, that's not known. But so I would encourage them to check, on that if they're interested in.
Absolutely, and we'll have people get in touch with us to get in touch with you. Yeah, that would be great to offer some assistance and advice on where to go. That's good stuff.
Absolutely.
I guess, and once again, what really excited me about your presentation at the UC was, well, like we just talked about with the use of GIS with the survey. So I guess from your perspective, can you tell us how important or how some steps you think would be necessary, and how important it is that really anybody that's in GIS that would want to make a transition to including their GIS knowledge base to become more knowledgeable or even become a surveyor. Tell us about how the way you see that is a good good flow, good pathway to a great career in surveying.
Sure, absolutely. I would recommend any GIS person wanting to make the leap, which I've had several reach out to me over the last few years, because using GIS to create surveys is kind of eye-opening to that GIS person who's like, man, I really wish I could make this leap. It is going to be a educational path. It's going to be, kind of a outside, experience. You're going to have a lot more opportunities to go on the land and actually find the property that you are already mapping, but you're going to learn a lot, and that is going to take some, perseverance. So I do have some advice for the GIS person who is, I would recommend you contact your board of land surveyors in your state, and make sure that you qualify for the education requirement, and make sure your degree actually counts towards that. If your state is, what that requirement is, I would go ahead and reach out. That'd be the first step. Reach out to the board. Then I would start working on your time and seat under a licensed surveyor. So whatever they recommend as far as your education requirement, they're going to always tell you an experience requirement too. In Florida, it's 4 years. You can take part-time. I would recommend part-time jobs. I'd recommend, however you can get that time that you need. And the board can tell you, how much that time is going to count towards your actual goal there. I would recommend taking, just as a GIS person going on this path, I would recommend taking the NCSS practice exam. I would then read Brown's, and I know that means that's a long time, but it's Brown's Boundary Control and Legal Principles. That takes a while, but I'd read it and make lots of note cards. I would get a good calculator that is a surveying related to surveying calculations, and then I would get a good practice test prep course and do that, and then I would supplement some geodesy training on YouTube. And a good flow would be literally read Brown's, do the practice exam in NCSS. I would take the prep course. I would do the practice exam, which comes with a prep course. I would study your weak points and then take the exam. And that's after getting your education requirement and your time NC in order. That is a path from GIS all the way into surveying. Does that?
That's good. That's good, because what I like about it, and I've started saying this for several years, and then of course our current president, Linda Foster, she is a PLS and a GISP.
Absolutely. She is awesome,
and yes, she is incredible. That really the prototype surveyor going forward, even if they're not a GISP, but they do have that knowledge and that understanding of how GIS is really becoming that much more important in managing and disseminating data for everything that we're doing. And so I jokingly say occasionally that it's, if we can keep poaching off GISPs and bringing them into surveying, would be nice. But it really is a skill set in GIS that is just going to be so critical to becoming a very good surveyor, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So good. I'm trying to be cognizant of your time, respectful, because you're on the clock with working for us. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service. Want to ask you about mentors, because that's one thing that we try to talk about in a common theme through a lot of our podcasts and talking to a lot of our guests. Besides every surveyor having a story, how important mentors, educators, people you've worked with, worked for, anyone you want to give a shout out to, and what was it that they contributed to you that you found that beneficial, that really helped you get to those next steps of your career?
So mentors to me are, it really means the difference between growing and not growing, in your field. And I want to give a shout out to two guys, and I owe a lot to them, and I really appreciate their turning the lights on, so to speak. I know I was having a conversation with Linda Foster and Frank Conklin, a guy out at Esri, and we were talking about those people who turn the lights on. Well, the two that really turned the lights on for me, number one would be Daniel Johns. He's the geospatial director over at ETM, and this, I would say, he turned the lights on for GIS for me, because I'd never worked with anybody that passionate. Anybody that was that, just loved the field, loved advancement, was ready to, put in hours. I'd come in and he'd be working at, we'd hear about him working till, 2 a.m. or something. And it's like, man, I've never met anybody this passionate about GIS. And so he taught me a lot. And when I say a lot, I would say, there in the beginning, almost everything that I, was operating in, this guy was pouring into me. And so it was, it's pretty much Daniel and YouTube, and so the next guy that really turned the lights on for me for surveying is Jason Clements. He's my current supervisor, but he's taken the time to really teach. And I think that's something that, you know, is it's a lost art. And I think it's something, as the profession is aging, we're I think the last statistic was that there's most of the surveyors in Florida are over 55, which is the current statistic. But I think that the teaching of the actual field is going to be what's going to bring in those next people, that are coming in. And I think Jason's doing a great job of that, in that he's actually, he's empowering, but at the same time, he trusts, the product that I'm going to make is something that a professional is going to make. And so, he's helping me with my weaknesses, inside of surveying. And I literally learn, something, all the time, but, and some are less painful than others, in learning.
Yes.
But I think that's where we got to go, is like, this mentor question is such an important question, because we don't have enough. We have, like I mentioned, the almighty dollar kind of quick and fast and dirty survey that is super quick, and it's not, I don't fault the guy who's out there trying to make a living. But what it does is it leaves sometimes that party chief, or that guy who's needing to learn a lesson in this moment, lacking something, that he could have gained from this experience, that kind of the supervisor
Exactly.
sort of holds on to, and has to just deal with and get on to the next job. But when they bring you in and help you and say, hey, what do you think about this? And let's whiteboard this and literally see the choices to make. That is something I think we got to have. So I appreciate that question, and I appreciate these two guys in my life for turning the lights on for me. So,
well, and I guess I gotta tell you, I'm impressed, especially with your situation now, that in your role, you have a mentor now. Even at this point in your career, you have a valuable mentor that is helping you gain more knowledge, more experience all the time. And
every day.
That's impressive. That's the type of work environments we need to keep pressing each other. My last question, my standard question for everyone. We keep hearing about we're trying to throw dirt on the grave of surveyors because we're antiquated, we're whatever. Things are really progressing along pretty good, and especially with the technology and the things like you're doing, putting GIS and surveying together. So how does the future of surveying look to you?
Yeah, I mean, we've come so far, from the rope stretchers of Egypt, all the way through, we've got, the magnetic compass, the solar compass, all the way through, our transit, all the way through, our theodolites, and now, total station and multi-station now, where it's scanning and shooting these points, to GPS, which is kind of somewhere in the middle there. And we've, to 3D scanners. We were talking about that a while ago. Mm-hmm. I think as a profession, I think the future of the profession looks different, but I think it looks the same. And I mean by that is, it looks like we're going to always have different tools, but we're always going to be the same professionals. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, all these guys who were surveyors were not our, they were not necessarily different. They were the same professionals that all of us are. They just had different tools. And I think the future of surveying is, as long as we don't go, anytime we tie ourselves to like a anchor, a particular tool set, maybe for some people it may be CAD, and I'm not saying GIS is the answer, the be all. I'm just saying that literally maybe it's the people who are tying themselves to theodolites, at one point, or the people who are tying themselves to the chain, at one point, no pun intended. But like that becomes, an anchor to that era, and I think as the thing moves forward, we're going to have always different technology. I think it just becomes embracing it and getting out to the schools. Like, honestly, I got an opportunity to come out to Troy. I got an invitation to come out to Texas A&M, to those geospatial departments. And I cannot tell you how exciting that is, because what I'm seeing in the classrooms is that the GIS people and the surveying people are in a lot of the same classes. They speak the same language. They don't have the same, barriers like what we've seen between, in our era here. But like what I'm seeing is there's an embrace of new things. And I think just to see the profession advance, we got to have the mentoring that brings up those people who are being trained in those new ways of technology, not new ways of surveying, just new ways of technology.
Right.
And actually, bring them in, teach them, allow them to make mistakes, give them opportunities to take charge and advance. And that is, I think, how we advance as a profession. But I think we're losing it when we back off of mentoring. If we're going to advance it, we got to have the new technology, but it requires us bring in those people who, like your GIS tech who's there, who may not have even thought, man, I didn't even think I could even get a survey license ever,
Right.
And because that was me. I mean, that really was me. And because at one point you kind of had to pick your path, and I think now we're seeing so much of merging of those two, of the technology world. I think it's just a lot of technology is merging together, so that our profession is going to look like, it's going to look like the technology of the day. We still got to do our job as professionals to check the accuracy of these products, no matter what it's built in, and the judgment of, which combines the law and the archaeology and the actual, historian side of surveying. We've got to do our job as professionals and verify, the products. But even, like the deed reader that's come out, from this new GIS, product. I would love that thing if I had a 27-page legal description. I would verify every line, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? I would verify.
It is a time saver, but yeah.
I would verify every line, and that's the job of the professional.
Exactly.
I think that's, even when we get into these multi-stations with scanning and stuff, we've got to be able to put controls on the accuracy levels that we're getting and providing. But I think that's where we mentor these people coming out of schools. We mentor these people that are diving off into these specialized things, and we really bring them up. I think that's how it happens.
Excellent. Well, I do want to have a quick shout out to the Trojans and to the Aggies. Both programs have been participants in our NSPS National Student Competition in the spring, and it's being able to be around those students and see the enthusiasm. Like you said, you're going there on campus with them, and bottom line is we're exposing them to more and more opportunities, and that's great. I'm glad to hear it that you're having those opportunities to go back the other way. That's fantastic. That's what we should all strive to do. So,
Absolutely.
Woody, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. I'm so glad that I came across this session that Linda was putting on out in San Diego. I know a couple of my contemporaries are another officer of NSPS. We were there in the audience as well, and we were impressed with the whole session. But we were definitely impressed with what your contributions are from a side of surveying that I don't think anybody really even realizes is there. And so thank you for that. And
yes, sir. Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, we definitely want to stay in touch. We want to hear more exciting stories down the line. And we'll cross paths again here one of these days. So I will definitely appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I can't wait.
Yeah, very good. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Surveyor Says. We appreciate Woody and like say, and Linda and everybody that did everything with the surveying session out there at the UC. That was very important to make those ties together, and we look to bring you more information from Esri and a couple of upcoming webinars that Linda's going to put on. Wherever you listen to this podcast, hit that subscribe button, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you. You've been listening to Surveyor Says, the NSPS Podcast, brought to you by the National Society of Professional Surveyors. If you have any questions about today's episode or any other topic, please email us at info@nsps.us.com, as we are here to help. Subscribe to the podcast on most of your favorite streaming platforms, as well as our podcast host, Podbean. For more information about the podcast and NSPS, please visit our website, nsps.us.com. And remember, it's a great day to be a surveyor.